All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. If you've been enjoying the content, please make sure to like and subscribe. We appreciate the support. But we're going to dive right into this game at Madison Square Garden, Kentucky versus Michigan State. Kentucky, the heavy favorite. Marcus, what are your initial thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if heavy favorite is the word, just because
On paper, they are.
I don't know though, because it's the floor of Michigan. Like as much as I hate on Michigan State, like they have a high enough floor that keeps games close, right? They have a front court that rebounds the basketball. They're 7th on the offensive glass, 17th on the defensive glass. They get to the foul line. Granted, like one thing they've really struggled with, and we knew this was going to be a struggle all year long, is shooting the three ball. You know, they're bottom 15 in the country in 3-point percentage. They don't shoot a ton of threes either, but you know, the front court and the higher floor defense and coaching just kind of keeps games close. You know, they're able to muck it up because they play a slower pace and, you know, can limit possession count. You know, so this game is going to be really intriguing to watch, I think. Can Michigan State do that? You know, can they win the glass? And can they limit possessions, you know, to keep Kentucky out of transition, right? And, you know, Kentucky's 86th in tempo so far this year. You know, Kentucky's been really good on the glass as well. So I think, like, if Michigan State can win the glass, that's something I'll be really intrigued to see. But you know, I like you said, Nate, like heavy favorite on paper. Like I much more prefer the talent of Kentucky, but just stylistically, like I don't know if it really ends up being a game that can be like run away with, just because of Izzo and the way that Michigan State plays.
Yeah, I would agree. Cody, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, mostly I would echo all the same thoughts there. I mean, just I think you kind of have to look out for the injuries of Kentucky right now, and you know that could come back to bite them in a game like this if you're not going to have your point guard and you're forced to execute in the half court against the Tom Izzo defense. I think that's going to be pretty tough. It's going to be a tall task. You know, kind of just ask Coach Cal in that Arkansas offense when they had to go to East Lansing and try to operate against a set defense. You know, what was that game? 69-66. They really just struggled to get anything going in the half court. And, you know, if you're not going to have your point guard and Jalen Lowe, you're kind of going to have to do it by committee. And it's going to be up to guys like Denzel Aberdeen and Otega Oweh to, you know, generate plays at a high level, as well as, you know, Brandon Garrison, Diabate, and Moreno as like DHO hubs as well. They need to make strong decisions with the ball in this game in order to, you know, kind of break this Michigan State defense, which, you know, it's going to be extremely difficult to do. The battle on the glass is going to be very interesting. Two very good teams on the glass, like Marcus mentioned. I would give a slight leg up to Michigan State just because they really value it on both ends of the floor, and they kind of have to rely on it in a sense. Kentucky can do a little bit more with the ball, a little bit more on the offensive end. They have a little bit more talent across the board, but like Marcus said, like this is a feisty Michigan State team that's going to limit the possession count in this game. Kentucky really wants to get out and run. It's going to be another battle of pace, kind of similar to the Arkansas Michigan State game. So yeah, I'm very intrigued to see how this game plays out. One thing I would like to see is Kentucky getting a little bit more aggressive on the defensive end. They're just 330th in turnover rate defense on the season. This is a Michigan State guard group, and I think just roster in general that's gettable in this area. Outside of Fears, and Fears has his share of turnover issues, or has had his share over the course of his career. But outside of him, like, there's not a ton of ball handlers that you can trust, and especially with them in a half court setting, they're going to probably really struggle to operate if they're not getting on the offensive glass. So that's going to be another interesting thing to see, is if Kentucky can kind of ramp up the pressure with these wing athletes.
Marcus, what does Michigan State have to do to pull off the upset, if you want to call it an upset? What are their keys to the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think biggest thing is slowing the pace down right from the get-go. I think if they can do that, you know, keep Otega Oweh, keep Denzel Aberdeen like out of transition, keep them from getting downhill. and getting to the rim, right? I mean, Michigan State hasn't been fantastic at protecting the rim so far this season. On what Torvik classifies as like close twos, opponents are 28 for 41 thus far this season against Michigan State. So, this is a Kentucky team, as we talked about, that's a little bit more balanced this year. Granted, they haven't really been putting as much pressure on the rim as I would have anticipated. They haven't gotten to the rim really much at all. They're in the bottom 75, I think, in free throw rate offense. I would expect that to change a little bit. But for them, I think it's really about controlling the glass as well. Keeping Kentucky out of transition, keeping the pace low, and then if they can make a few threes, we talked about this Michigan State team being a team that doesn't shoot the three all that well. Like, Kentucky's going to give up the three ball at times, right? They're 336 in the country in 3-point rate defense. Michigan State's 351st in 3-point percentage as a team. If they can make a few early, I think that'll go a long way in helping them win this game. So I guess the three things in my mind are controlling the pace, winning the glass against, a really strong Kentucky rebounding team as well, and knocking some shots down. I think those three things will go a long way in leading to a victory for Michigan State.
And Cody, what are Kentucky's keys to the game to come out of here with a win?
Yeah, I mean, I would think it's really just the battle of the pace, like Marcus mentioned. It's about getting out in transition for this team. They've had some concerns in the half court so far, and Michigan State is a team that's most likely going to force you to execute in the half court for the most part, and that's why I kind of want them to, ramp up the pressure on the wing and really get after some of these like suspect ball handlers to up the possession count in this game. Really get out in transition a little bit more often, and I'm assuming Jalen Lowe isn't going to be able to go in this game, so Denzel Aberdeen and Otega Oweh need to be kind of big time playmakers in this game for Kentucky to come out with a win. And then one final thing would just be Collin Chandler continuing his perimeter efficiency as well as Cam Williams in this game. I think those are really the biggest things here. They need to start knocking down perimeter shots at a higher level. Mark Pope offenses are typically perimeter dominant, and they usually knock down the three at a higher clip than they have. I mean, they're second in the nation in 2-point offense, which is rather impressive so far. But to knock down the three at a slightly higher clip would go a long ways for this team over the course of the entire season, and not just in this game.
All right, Marcus, who's your pick for this game?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Kentucky. I think the talent on this side for them, I think they're going to be able to win the pace battle. I think they're going to knock down the three at a higher clip than they have, 143rd in the country thus far. They're going to make more shots. I think they can limit Michigan State on the glass. And I think, like Cody said, I think they maybe can turn Michigan State over a little bit with their weaker guard group. So I'm gonna go with Kentucky to take down Michigan State. I'll say by 8.
All right, Cody, what's your pick?
Yeah, I am in agreement here, basically for all the same reasons. I think Kentucky will give Michigan State like its toughest challenge when it comes to rebounding edge. This is something that Izzo teams have kind of lived off for the last 2 seasons, and Kentucky has the size up front. They have the athletes. I mean, people have talked about the center group being a little bit suspect, but one thing that they can do is they can rebound the basketball on the defensive end. Like Malachi Moreno, 23.6% defensive rebound rate. Mohamed Diabate is over 20%. Garrison's around that 17% mark. They have a lot of depth, and Michigan State's a team that kind of is like a strength in numbers kind of team, or was at least last year, and a little bit less so this season. But ultimately, I think Kentucky can, take away their strength to an extent. So I'll take them in a close one, because I think Michigan State can, really kind of muck this game up. They're always a really good underdog. I'll say Kentucky wins at 79-75.
All right, wrapping things up here. As always, thank you for listening to the Mainly Hoops podcast.